Well, we're standing in a pile of leaves. This is kind of a ditch that we have, or a low spot on the property. For years we've been filling this with grass trimmings, leaves that we rake up in the fall, and other yard debris. And we've slowly been kind of building the property up. And as it decomposes, it forms a very rich soil, a great dirt to plant a garden in. Anyway, we're going to continue in this area, and we're going to do something called a Hugelkulture mound. That's a German style of permaculture where you find rotting and decaying wood, logs, stuff like that in the woods, and you build a mound with that as your base. And then once that's down, we're going to cover that with a little bit of leaves, cut grass, and then maybe a little bit of dirt to seed it so we can use it right away. That'll help everything to decompose. But the idea is, if you walk through the woods, you'll notice on any dead logs or stumps, there's lots of stuff growing. And that's where the idea comes. All the nutrients that are in those logs, we're going to basically put into the base of this mound. So that'll help feed the roots of the plants that we plant as they grow. So this will be a vegetable garden, and we're probably going to be planting either pumpkins, squash, cantaloupe, anything that likes to send out runners or vines. We can plant it safely here and not worry about that choking out other vegetables that we have in our other vegetable gardens.
Yep, and we're very used to working in raised beds anyway, and a Hugelkulture mound is the same theory as a raised bed, except using rotting, decaying wood and other compost as its base. So for us, the next step is to go out in the woods, gather some decaying, rotting wood that we can't use to burn in our stove, but that we can use as a base for our next garden space.
Let's go. Wintertime, lots of trees come down in the early spring with the storms, the winds that we have, and in the rain. A lot of trees come down, and the stuff that's been on the ground for a season or two that's a little too wet for us to burn, something that's been on the ground for too long, that's what we're going to be collecting, the really far gone stuff. We're in the woods behind our house. We've got a little property here with lots of forest, and like this stuff here. So look, it's really too far gone for us to burn, but it's ready to start decomposing, rotting, and would be perfect for a Hugelkulture mound. So this is the type of wood that we're going to be collecting. We're just going to load up our trailer, bring it back to where we're going to be putting the mound, and we'll start stacking it up and getting the mound ready.
So while we gather and stack all those logs, let me give you a little background on Hugelkulture. Hugelkulture is a German word meaning mound culture or hill culture, and is said to have been practiced in German and East European societies for hundreds of years. So, how did two rural New Englanders decide to give this a try? We were inspired by a YouTube channel we follow called Back to Reality. It was originally called A Guy, a Girl, and a Camper Van, and it's a great place with some awesome videos if you're looking for something good to watch. They've been doing a variety of garden types over the last few years, and this one looked like a great fit for our new garden area this year, which was a low, sloping spot we couldn't do much with otherwise. As we mentioned earlier, mounds are constructed by piling logs, branches, plant waste, compost, and soil directly on the ground. The mounds may also be made from alternating layers of wood, sod, compost, straw, and soil, depending on what's available in your area and what you would prefer to use. For us, living in the woods with lots of decaying logs, literally in our backyard, this sounded like a great way to do some cleaning up and create a space that would give back to us in the form of more vegetable gardens. As we said, we do burn wood in our wood stove, but there are branches and small trees that have been down for years that are too far gone to use for heating our home, but those will be the perfect starter for our Hugelkulture mound. So off we went to haul, cut, load, unload, and stack our logs for the base of our mound. As you can see, we're stacking the logs all in the same direction and creating a base that will ultimately be about 4 feet wide and 24 feet long. The pile of logs is about 2.5 feet high and will still need some composted material and soil added on top. This is a big Hugelkulture mound, and many people make theirs a lot smaller, at about 3 feet wide by 6 feet long, with a finished height about 3 feet tall. Some people swear by Hugelkulture, and others are very skeptical as, like the Ruth Stout method we discussed in our earlier potato planting video, it goes against the norm of tilling flat ground every year, adding a lot of fertilizer, and planting everything in neat, orderly rows. Hugelkulture mounds for us were a great choice and a fun experiment. Many people build their mounds in the fall and allow time for them to rest or to start the decomposition process before planting. With everything that's going on and some time constraints on getting extra garden space in, we decided to follow the method of immediate planting and just see how it goes. You can plant pretty much any vegetables in a Hugelkulture mound. It's recommended, though, that you don't plant perennials like fruit trees, bushes, asparagus, as the settling that occurs during the decomposition is bad for the root systems of these plants. The mounds are great for annuals that are planted from seeds or seedlings each year, and as that's our plan, this should work great for us. We are thinking of planting the things that usually take over our kitchen gardens, such as cucumbers, yellow summer squash, zucchini squash, spaghetti squash, butternut squash, acorn squash. Yes, as you can tell, we really like squash, watermelons, cantaloupes, and the like. These are all plants that have huge leaves or grow on long trailing vines that cover our other plants, block our walkways, and create havoc by our house. In previous years, we've had our 5 kitchen garden raised beds and the squash shadowed and crowded out our peppers, covered our walkways between the beds, just a mess. With the new Ruth Stout inspired beds in our front yard and this Hugelkulture mound here, we're hoping to have a much larger crop to can and dehydrate for the winter, as well as adding in some new plants we hadn't tried before, like kohlrabi and black cherry tomatoes. The position of the Hugelkulture mound will allow us to grow our melon plants and viney squash off the backside of the mound, where they will have plenty of room to grow and spread out their vines without overrunning our other plants.
Well, we finished the first stage of building this mound. It's about 4 feet wide by 24 feet long by maybe 2.5 feet high. So the next step would be to cover it with more compostable material, yard waste like grass clippings, leaves. We happen to have quite a few leaves here, if you haven't already guessed that. Got a big pile of them right there. So what we're probably going to do is use the bucket on our tractor and just to save our backs a little bit of work, dump as much of that as we can on top of this pile of rotted wood. We'll get that all mounded up and ready to go, and then we'll seed it with a little bit of dirt, just so the decomposition can get a head start. Maybe we might be able to plant in it this year rather than letting it sit for a year before we can use it. Anyway, I think that's it for tonight. We did a lot of work, and it's time to go make some dinner for the doggies and the kitties and for us. And signing out.
Okay, so now we have our base of our 4-foot by 24-foot Hugelkulture mound set with our decaying logs. It's time to put some compost material on top for our first layer. So what we're going to use today is some mulched leaves, and then on top of that we're going to put some dirt, and that'll be the beginnings of getting our Hugelkulture mound ready to go for this year. So we finished putting the leaves on our Hugelkulture mound, and we've also covered it with about 6 inches of dirt. So now we're ready for our next step, which is going to be to cover it with hay. So the reason we're covering it with hay is it keeps the moisture in the soil, and it also helps reduce the amount of weeding that we need to do. So once we get the hay on, we'll be ready to plant. Got quite a stretch of hay to do, so let's get that done so we can move on to the next phase. As I mentioned, we're covering the soil layer of the mound with hay. On our potato beds, we used straw and have had very little weeds, and it's doing a great job. We could only get hay when we picked these up, and yes, there is a difference. Straw is the bottom cuts of the grasses, and hay includes the tops with the seeds. So spoiler alert here to anyone who is going to watch the next video, hay definitely produces more grass from the seeds in it and does require more weeding, at least initially. Covering the mound with straw or hay has two purposes, as I said. One, to keep in the moisture so it requires less watering, and two, to help reduce the need to weed. You have to remember, there will always be weeds in a garden, even with straw. But if you're as busy as we normally are, the less weeding you need to do, the better. So straw would be my recommended option. Now, there is another benefit of the hay or straw covering, and that is the composting process of the hay, which adds nutrients to the soil. We're planning on adding more hay to the mound in the fall, which will begin decomposing over the winter and produce a better composted soil for us to plant in next spring. By adding hay or straw, and maybe a little bit of other natural compost to the mound, the soil will continue to get better every year. So we finished putting the hay on the Hugelkulture mound, and it's all finished. So the next step is going to be deciding what we're going to plant, and that will be in another video. So thank you, and remember to thumbs up, to subscribe, leave a comment below, and click on that bell so you get notified of our next video. Bye.